recording this computer. Okay, there we go. For those who don't attend today, what they're going to find is that our recording is located here under seminar option 2. They'll be asked to review the content from our video, and then they'll be asked to respond for credit today. You all have credit because you're here. Now, moving forward, I do expect that if you want to have credit in this, you're doing more than just coming in, you're also participating, right? But beyond that, you do have your discussion for this week. And so once you've done the readings, right, you want to post a response here to our discussion. And even though we say it's a Wednesday due date on that, you can take until Thursday. I'm not penalizing you this week on when you get that in. I mean, I'm not going to penalize you if you get it on Thursdays this whole term. Just try your best. There's a lot going on. And if you feel that you're overwhelmed or that you feel that there's too much to it, we can reconsider the assignments. So this week you do have an assignment, and the assignment is just for you to answer these questions. And these questions are about the resources and the readings for this week. We're going a little bit off of a traditional reading. You don't have the digital history book here. Instead, what you have are these interactives and these videos. And then, you know, once you read and watch the videos, I want you to respond to the assignment. Then I know that you've looked at them. And I want you to take your time and look at, you know, what this is, because like the Harlem Renaissance, for instance, right? We talk about the 1920s. I forgot to put this in my slide, but the Harlem Renaissance was this time of rebirth, and I wouldn't even say rebirth, but like the birth of African-American culture in a modern venture. And what I mean by that is there's this large migration of African Americans out of the South and into the North. And at the turn of the 20th century, you know, 1890 to about 1910, the African American movement for equal access to protections under the federal laws, right? Access to jobs and to housing. We go from seeing that struggle in the Supreme Court, we talked about that before, right? And then it becomes one of an intellectual debate. You get like W.E.B. Du Bois from Tuskegee, and you get D.E.B. Du Bois, you know, from Massachusetts, and they're talking about what it means to be, you know, part of this African-American experience at that time. And they're both saying that these groups of people need to have jobs, they need to be employed, but Washington is saying people need to be educated in work and skilled in labor, right? Become a skilled worker. Whereas W.E.B. Du Bois is saying African Americans need more than just that kind of education. They also need to learn about the humanities. So there's a struggle there, but it's all about, you know, education. When we get to the 1920s, right, this movement of African American experience shifts from looking to find ways to become part of the larger social environment to a reflection inward on what it means to be in the African American community. And so we start to see the celebration of African American experiences out of like New York and the Harlem Renaissance. We see the rise of music like jazz. We see the rise of artists and playwrights. We see people like Nella Larson, who writes about race identity. And also we see one of my favorite authors here, Langston Hughes. And he writes about the African American experience. Can you see this, the poem here? Let America be America again. Let it be the dream it used to be. Let it be the pioneer on the plain seeking a home where he himself is free. You ever read this before? Right?
No.
Let my land be a land where liberty is crowned with no false patriotic wreath, but opportunity is real and life is free. Equality is in the air we breathe. There's never been equality for me, right? And so we see this movement and self-expression And again, it's called the Harlem Renaissance, but Renaissance, I think, is a misnomer because Renaissance is a rebirth of a celebration. And this is the first time that African Americans are in an environment where slavery has ended, where they are beginning to create their own economies, right, and progress in a way that's reflective of kind of the American dream. So, you know, you'll have those kind of resources. I want you to listen to this podcast. It's the Supreme Court ruling that led to 70,000 forced sterilizations. This is about the Buck v. Bell case, and I'll talk to you about that. So I'm trying to diversify your resources here. You've also got a crash course video, and then, you know, images here. So I'm trying to diversify your resource, your content, so that it's, look at this. She's making sure that making sure that the bathing suit, right, is no more than 6 inches above her knee. What is that? You know, what does this kind of mean when we look at this? Oh, there's old Charles there. Charles, incidentally, was part of the America First Committee that believed that the United States should stay out of World War II. He and Henry Ford gave money to the Nazis. So there's that. Louis Armstrong as well here, right? And the rise of the popularity of Black music. We see the explosion of cars, right? And now we have that technology from prior to and then during World War I coming into play. But this is a time of you know, enjoyment for some, you know, for some. Okay, so let me pull up here and I will open this up so you can see it now as well. The 20s. I hope you can, I'm gonna stop sharing so that I can pull up my slides. All right, and then I'm gonna try to share this with you. Hey, Bob. Hey, Bob. Hey, Bob. Hey, Bob. All right, I've tried. Bob, can you hear us? Bobby. Everybody wave at Bob. 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 Can you hear us? Poor Bob. He's trying. All right. So let's see here. Can you see my slides now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Oh, I really don't like doing this from here. So when we talk about the 1920s, what comes to mind for you?
Flappers.
Flappers? Yeah.
Prohibition.
Prohibition? Okay.
The Model T. Cars, yeah, Model T.
Yeah, right. So we're seeing the advancement of this technology. What else?
The decline of the agricultural society, kind of.
That's what you think about when you think of the 1920s? That's what first comes to your mind? It's true.
No, everyone else said what first came to my mind.
It's okay. It's true though, right? I mean, we don't always think about it that way. But, you know, Zephyr, that's important because it's true. There's a lot that goes on in the 1920s. And we know what comes next, which is the Great Depression. And, you know, I know that that's going to be a really intense week next week when we talk about that, since, you know, we're facing one right now. But there's a lot that we can learn from the past. And so it's timely in some ways. But yeah, this is a period where we see the women's rights movement really find traction. Now women have the right to vote, and that political voice plays out. And we see, like you said, the temperance movement leading to the 20th Amendment and the ending of drinky drinks. But that's not true though, is it? Because people are gonna get their drinkies. And if you don't give it to them illegally, they're gonna get them illegally. And so of course, prohibition sparks off the criminal syndicate across the country as these mobsters start finding new ways to make money by bringing in alcohol. And in these speakeasies and in these places like in Harlem, these black areas even, now you've got people coming in to party together. And so you've got for the first time like this real integration and new kind of like intermixing of people in these social situations. So we also know that, you've got more immigration coming in. Europeans are flooding in at this point. And of course, whenever we have large groups of immigrants coming in from any area, there's going to be pushback on that. And so we have a limitation on the number of immigrants allowed by national origins. I might have mentioned this before, but it's one of those ways to keep America white. So basically, we've got these immigrants coming in, and so the government's going to say, okay, well, we'll take, a certain amount of people coming in from each country based upon earlier immigration. So obviously that's going to, make a restriction here, providing immigrant visas to 2% of the total population of each nationality in the United States as of 1890, right? So obviously we've got restrictions that, and of course, for some reason, we're still hot to trot against Asia. So, there's complete exclusion of immigrants coming from the East. I don't know, racism, what can you say? But this is also a time of partying, right? A revolt against these 19th century mores. What am I saying? What am I talking about here? These Victorian mores. What is that? You tell me.
Is it like the ideas?
It's the social norms, right? The social norms. We have the production of the standardized goods. I mean, right now, our economy is tanking, right? Why is our economy tanking right now?
Oh, it's the coronavirus.
Well, the coronavirus is doing what? It's causing us all to have to stay inside, right? And so our small businesses are shutting down. We're not able to go out and spend our money. We're not making as much money, so we can't spend it. But remember, we've been talking about this since day one in our class. Our entire US economy and our lifestyle is about consumerism. Will, have we talked about that?
We have.
Yeah. And so if it all comes to a stop, right? That's the problem when you are basing your economy on that. So we have the rise here of national advertising, intermixing of people of different colors. Radio and movies begin to create a national identity in a new way. And then, of course, prosperity. The dollar is going to replace the pound as the most important currency. And we start to see the shift of capitalists attempting to create imperialistic actions in different countries, such as, here we go, the Fordlandia, right? Ford tries to go down to Brazil and create, this American working plant there, where those who are coming to work there have to, speak English and they have to take on these American lifestyles. Why do you think that Ford wanted to go to the Brazilian rainforest?
Raw materials.
What kind of raw materials? Any idea?
Oh,
Rubber.
wood.
Wood?
Oh, rubber. Yeah.
Rubber tree plants, right? Yeah, absolutely. So if you go there and you own the land, you own the resources. So we have that. We get a new credit system, right? That's going to happen here, but we just have stuff, y'all. So much stuff. I mean, look at this crazy curlers, right? Up here in the top left corner. You want to strap your head into that? No? Right? But we want the stuff. Don't you want the stuff? Who doesn't want this? Katrina, don't you want the stuff? Ian wants the stuff, right? Shelby wants the stuff.
I love stuff.
Right, we love stuff, right? And that's what, is keeping us going at this period of time. And so you get like the Great Gatsby stories, and you've got these flappers, and it all looks so, delicious and decadent, and these speakeasies and these jazz, and everyone's beautiful. But on the other side, as Zephyr pointed out, right, for the first time in our national history, we're seeing a decline in our farms. Now, this is going to lead us ultimately, right? There's two components or three components that are going to lead to the largest man-made environmental devastation of the 20th century, and it is the Dust Bowl. But you have to think about the ways in which the land was being tended, right? There was not a lot of letting land sit fallow. There was not the concern of replenishing the soil. It was take, take, take. But think about the ways in which US citizens claimed the Midwest, right? It was through the removal of indigenous peoples with the idea of westward expansion. And from day one with the US and the colonies on the seaboard, and once they began to create their own country, the idea was this land is so vast, it'll take us centuries upon centuries to populate. But that wasn't the case, right? When you've got a lot of resources and you got a lot of food, what do you get? A lot of babies, right? And so it wasn't that long. It only took, 150 years basically, to get to this point. But the idea of unrestrained and unrestricted growth under the concept of manifest destiny that says, hey, it's all for us, it's meant for us, right? This is exactly what we're supposed to be doing, is taking and taking from this land. It's going to lead to environmental impacts that we still suffer from. It's going to lead to the Dust Bowl, especially when you complicate the issue with one of the largest droughts in US history. And so that's on the forefront as well. And, because of this technological advancements, the ground is raped, that much quicker. So you've got all these immigrants coming in, right? You've got this decadence, but whenever we see high rates of immigrants coming in, we know that we're going to see nativism, right? And I would love to link in and watch these videos, but I haven't found a way to share audio with you yet. So I'm just going to let you go back and watch them if you want to. We also are lower on time than we would have to watch all these. But who can explain to me what nativism is? It's not a new concept for us. Dan?
Yeah. Oh, well, nativism. I think it's like because we weren't the first people, but because we were born here, we should own like all the housing, all the better stuff, instead of all of these people that just came in.
Yeah, right. And, we're here, it's ours, and yeah, you can't have it. Very good. We're going to see discrimination against Europeans. We've talked about the rising numbers of Eastern Europeans that are coming in. And so we're going to see discrimination and less than full protection of the law for some of them. The Scasio Vanzetti case is one of those where someone was murdered, and these two gentlemen were accused of it. We believe that they probably did it, but they were not given full protection under the law. The case was rushed through, and they were convicted, and there was an outpouring, an outcrying that occurred from that. We also know, Cole, are you here? I feel like we've lost some people. No, Cole? All right. Well, we also see the rise of racism, and it's around this period of time that we have the highest membership of the KKK that we'll have. So that's, troubling in itself as well. We also have, nativism that's not just towards these newly arriving immigrants, but people who are already here. So, what might be the impact of nativism on the treatment of like indigenous peoples? who were the first peoples to populate the area. What do you think? Man, this is harder than in the classroom. Yeah, like no one wants to speak. All right, you're gonna get a pass this week. This week only. Who was gonna say something?
I want to give other people the participation availability.
Yeah, no one's participating. I know, right? You warm yourselves up, y'all, because next week everybody who's in here needs to be contributing. I can't do it all by myself. I mean, I know I'm amazing, but come on, y'all, come on, right?
Is this another victims against victims thing? Where
Yeah,
they're like the Buffalo Soldiers were also just as racist towards the Native Americans. So the Native Americans are just as I don't know, they see as the African Americans as coming in and taking their land as well.
sure. And by the 1920s, you know, the plains and all that has already been invaded, if you will. And so this nativism is going to lead to targeted attacks. It'll lead to more restrictions of indigenous peoples when it comes to jobs. You know, oftentimes people who live on reservations have a hard time finding work because they're next to wherever the industry is next door to them. There's, you know, definitely nativism against indigenous peoples. It's kind of, you know, an odd truth. And then we have this pushback against modernity, right? People who are resisting the modern era, if you will. And we see that playing out with this fundamentalist movement out of the South, a response to this progressivism where we see in this example of the Scopes trial, there is a Tennessee law, which, you know, is, there we go. But the law said that you weren't allowed if you were a teacher, right, to teach evolution, right? The actual language was, it was not allowed to teach any theory that denies the story of the divine creation of man. And John Scopes, this fellow with the glasses up here, he was teaching evolution in this school, and so he was arrested and he was convicted under this law. And Charles Darrow came in to defend him. And although Darrow was able to highlight, right, the discrepancies of evolution as a science-based theory, still the jury found John Scopes guilty, and so it still stood. But it was a shift. This was a national, this got national coverage, right? As we saw this resistance to change coming out of the South. We also had the eugenics movement, and this is where the podcast comes into play, the Buck v. Bell. So eugenics, anybody want to take a stab of at what this means, eugenics?
It's basically the idea that there's a hierarchy of races.
Yeah.
And at the top is white people, and then there's different features and like different shaped noses and ears and skin colors, and it just moves all the way down, and black people are on the bottom.
Yeah, so absolutely. It was the idea that, you know, certain people should be breeding and certain people should not. They should definitely not be intermixing. We even have these places where, you know, people were forced to go in and to register their pedigree. And based upon your head size and, you know, your facial features, they would indicate, you know, what category you were in. And the idea was, if you read part of this article here, you know, it starts out with like the average family today in America, you know, they just been willy-nilly, you know, getting married and having children, and you know, then their children have been doing it as well. It's just, you know, genetic mess. Well, So we see that, and not genetic mess, but creating impurities in the races, if we will. And so out of this idea of eugenics comes these laws, right? Miscegenation laws, and then also compulsory sterilization. Surprise, surprise. As well as it helps to put restrictions on immigrants from places that aren't white. And so we have federally funded programs in 32 of the different states. And the Sterilization Act here of 1924 said that you can sterilize people who are in prison in certain cases if you have repeat offenders or those who show, I don't know, certain types of behaviors that would be unbecoming, right? The Sterilization Act also made it compulsory for people who were deemed to be quote unquote feeble-minded to be sterilized. So if they determined that you were insane, an idiot, an imbecile, or epileptic, right, then you would be sterilized. So, I mean, we've seen these kind of words before, like idiot, but this is the origin of it, right? And it had long-term repercussions on people. In Virginia, they created their own law, the, the Racial Preservation Integrity Law, I think it was. But who's going to be enforcing these laws, right? Who's going to be taking the action? It's doctors, and doctors are no fools. Well, some of them are, but in this case, the doctors were no fools, and so they were looking for a specific case that they could bring, right, to the Supreme Court to determine whether or not these laws were going to stand, because they sure didn't want to start sterilizing people and then, be hit with malpractice or I don't know what you would call it back then, but, sterilization of people illegally. And so they were looking for a case, and enter Carrie Buck. She was the perfect case candidate, they thought. She was living with a family, and her mother had already been put into one of these camps for feeble-mindedness, and her mother had already been sterilized, right? And so Carrie was being taken care of by a foster family, and the son of the foster family raped her. And when the family found out, they wanted to hide it, and so they accused her of having epileptic seizures and determined that she was, an imbecile because she was also pregnant, right? They really didn't want to deal with all of that. And so because she is now the second in a line, right, of people who are determined to be an imbecile, maybe, just maybe, the doctors are saying it proves our genetics, right? Our genetic lineage, that if one person is feeble-minded and we let them have babies, their babies will be feeble-minded, and their babies will be feeble-minded, and it'll be a strain on our society that we shouldn't, take on. And so if we just sterilize them, they'll be fine. And so she's the case example here. Now, to determine whether or not Carrie's baby was an imbecile, they brought in this nurse, I think it was, a sociologist. That's what it was, a sociologist. And a Red Cross nurse, that's right. And they hung out with baby Vivian for just, I don't know, I think it was maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours. And they determined somehow that this child under the age of 1 was below average and not normal because she wasn't, babbling correctly or whatever. Of course, this is what they wanted to find. Oh, there goes, yeah, bye. So in the case, right, in the case here, Justice Holmes, who, interestingly, when I was in law school, I heard over and over again how Oliver Wendell Holmes, not Oliver Wendell Holmes, the second, who was the justice here, that he was like this First Amendment advocate, right? A true hero. And yet there's all these cases where he made these horrible, horrible decisions. I don't understand why he's taught that way. But anyway, so he's the one who came up with this term, 3 generations of imbeciles is enough. And so the Virginia Racial Integrity Act was determined to be constitutionally valid. Carrie was then sterilized. And after she was sterilized, she was released back into the community because she was no longer a threat, right? But they proved. But here's the problem with it. Baby Vivian was adopted out, right? And she didn't live to be old. She was, I think, only like 9 or 10 when she passed away. But she was on the honor roll of her school. So baby Vivian did not have any of these issues that this nurse and the sociologist said that she had. And Doris Buck, right, who never showed any kind of signs of epileptic seizures or anything like that, went in for an appendicitis. And when she went in for that, they sterilized her. And Doris was just the sister of Carrie. So they were just like, covering their bases here, I guess. This is Carrie Buck in like the 1990s, I think it was. Paul Lombardo, who works at the law school at the University of Virginia, went and met with her. And when he met her, she was reading newspapers. Her friends said that she's fully literate. She was doing crossword puzzles. And upon examination, they could find no issues with her when it came to her, to her ability to navigate anything. So my point is that these racial integrity laws, these eugenic laws, were determined to be legal and constitutional under our Supreme Court determination in Buck v. Bell. And this is still good law. So what that means is that right now, if there was a desire to enforce these laws, we could be sterilized, right? If it could happen to Carrie, it could happen to us. Incidentally, beyond that, other groups of people were forced into sterilization without their knowledge. From 1929 to 1979, when the Racial Integrity Act was taken down, we have over 7,000, 8,000 people who were sterilized. There's a thing called the Mississippi appendectomy. I don't know if you've ever heard about that term, but beyond just what was legal under these laws, if you were a Black woman in the South and you went in for some kind of surgery in your abdomen, it was very likely that they also sterilized you at that time. Betty Lou Hamer, she was sterilized. The eugenics movement, they sterilized Elaine Riddick as well. And then not so long ago, there's Fatal Lee right there. And then, let's see, what was it? Yeah, 1974, 2 young Black girls were sterilized. Their mother, who was illiterate, could not read the papers that she was signing, right? The Southern Poverty Law Center revealed that in 74, it looked like between 100,000 and 150,000 people were being sterilized each year under federal programs. And even more recently, between 2006 and 2010 in California, almost 150 women were sterilized. And in fact, in some cases, if a inmate was agreed to be sterilized, they could be released from prison early. So these are like long-term impacts of these earlier antiquated laws. So, you've got the Great Depression. Oh, where's my, I had some pretty pictures. I wanted to talk about happy things for a minute. Oh, there we go, look at that. Yeah, so what else is happening in the 1920s? What else do we have? We have lots of innovations. We've got our first, what do you call a car with a top on it?
Convertible.
There you go, convertible. My poor brain, right? A convertible. Who doesn't like a convertible? That's fun times. What about cheeseburgers? Any of y'all eat cheeseburgers? It's like the American way, right? Eating your cheeseburgers while you're driving in your convertible. We get our stop signs, stop and go at this time, bulldozers, because bigger and better, baby, right? And even look at this. We can even go water skiing. Good times, right? Some people are partying. Some people are. And all of this leads us, right, to the next step. Black Tuesday, October 29th, 1929. More than 10 billion in market value vanished in 5 hours. How much is that today? Can someone look on there and see how much 10 billion in 29 would be today? Scary numbers, I'm sure. But there was, false inflation in the market, false inflation of shares.
151 billion.
There you go. That's a lot of money, right? It's a lot of money. So look at this. Florida and California had land speculations that led to the bank's failings and foreclosures. Does that sound familiar at all? Because that happens again in 2008. And then there was just this unequal distribution of power and income, right? And again, if we don't have the money, we can't get the convertibles. We can't eat our hamburgers in restaurants, that's what keeps us going. What about those cool curly cues? You can't get your crazy electric, curly cues on, fry your head. And then of course we had the reduction in these farm regions as well. And, Europe was also involved in this second industrial revolution, and they start making their own stuff. So even though at the turn of the 20th, 20 years earlier, we were on the forefront of making stuff, right? Making stuff, because we had all of the resources of the middle and the west of the North American continent at our fingertips, so many resources, and no one really to, negotiate with them. It was all ours to the taking, as long as, of course, you remove hundreds of thousands, if not millions of indigenous peoples. But all of that stuff put us on the forefront. Our economy was based on it. But once Europe begins making their own, demand goes down. And so stock prices fell from this, $262 to $22, the US steel. And steel was it, right? General Motors, one of the founders of General Motors ends up working in a bowling alley, y'all, right? I'm sorry, I was just imagining someone that I don't like working in a bowling alley instead of doing what they're doing now. Hundreds of thousands are hitting the road. They're migrating, they're looking for work. And next week, when we look at the images that come out of the Great Depression and the New Deal, we'll be looking at like the migrant mother, and we'll be looking at images that show the hardships on people. And so, yeah, here we go. Suicide rates go up. Birth rate is at its lowest. Why is that?
Can't take care of kids, so you don't have them.
You can't take care of it. You're not eating, right? If you're not eating, there's not a lot of babies. Remember that. Got to have food. Got to have lots to eat to make them babies. So yeah. So the federal investigation said that banks knowingly sold off worthless bonds, and then of course we have all of these investors that were dumping and loading their shares when they got word. That's why there's some people who are about to be in trouble right now, right, for dumping their shares a month and a half ago. The president of the New York Stock Exchange was convicted of stealing from customers, right? Look at that, including funds to aid widows and orphans. I mean, just bad. Just badness all the way around. Bye. Yeah, okay. And so then we go into, sorry, that was an ill-placed slide, y'all. And then so we go into the Depression. And the 1920s, yeah, we think about the flappers and we think about the speakeasies and all that, but of course, that was not the experience of the majority of people. We love in our historical memory to think of these highlights as something we all shared in. And it's really a very clever tool, right? Because if we're all thinking Great Gatsby and we're thinking the flapper, and we're not thinking about the experience really of the laborers at that time, then we are buying into the elite dream. And somehow we're connecting with that. And just that connection alone, right, creates an affiliation with the system of a few having and the rest of us having not, that we have right now. So unemployment rates reach 25%. What is our unemployment rate right now?
Like 7. No.
$3.6 as of October of last year.
I'm talking about right now.
Oh.
30%. Right. 30% right now. So we're in dangerous territories, right? And when you have this long-term unequal distribution of wealth, and now 30% of the population is out of work, they don't have backup money, You know, this is all paycheck by paycheck. We've been sitting in this situation, this continuing, right, divide between the haves and has-nots for so long now. So in the 1930s, when you have the Great Depression, and what we'll be talking about next week is the Great Depression, but we're going to be focusing on the New Deal because there's no reason to trigger ourselves at this moment by spending too much time talking about the dark part. I want to talk about, you know, the positive. I know you're like, Alyssa, that's you know, different for you. It's crazy, but we're going to do it. We're going to talk about, you know, the ways in which the government helped out people. Now, I told you, it's a very interesting term with all this going down. It's like, you know, the world was a very different place back in January. But I told you then when we started talking about Reconstruction, that the Reconstruction era was the first time that our federal government took on the role, right, of social programming for the people. And what that meant was the federal government created the Freedmen's Bureau that directly assisted people on the ground, African Americans, but people on the ground with education, with food, right, with jobs. Remember we talked about federalism, the separation of state power versus federal power, and who was supposed to be dealing with the individuals. We looked at some cases from the 1800s. There, the Supreme Court said, not you, federal government. When we talk about individuals, that is state issue only. But when you had, at the end of the Civil War, millions of people who had no work and no protections, the federal government was compelled to step in and play. And once again, after the Great Depression hits, with the New Deal, the federal government begins to engage in social programming. Now, some people have berated these programs as socialism, but what it was programs to help employ people directly, right? With 25% of the population out of work, the federal government put millions and millions of dollars into creating programs to get people working. And in those programs, right, the work they were doing was building the infrastructure of this country. So we're going to talk about that because hopefully we'll be under an administration that can do that in the next year or so. But that's for next week. We got a few minutes left. What do you got to say? I'm tired of hearing myself talk. Y'all want to see my dog? Can you let me do this? I'm gonna stop my sharing so I can see what you can see. Let's see. Where am I? Oh, there I am. I'm gonna see my dog. Say bye, you. Say hi, bye, you. Yeah, I know he's rowdy. Yeah. What do you got to say to me? You talk.
It's kind of depressing.
I just told you there was some silver linings.
Maybe that's why they called it the Depression.
Yeah, right? Yeah. It is depressing.
It's weird how history is repeating itself in like a, I don't know, sort of symmetric. It's like it's the 2020s and that was the 1920s. And
Yeah, a century later, that's been,
yeah,
causing a bunch of anxiety. People are like, every 100 years we're in it.
The Spanish flu is in the 20s here.
Yeah. So what is it? There's a saying that's attributed to Mark Twain. It says, history doesn't repeat, but the song sounds awfully familiar, something like that, right? So yeah, I mean, we are seeing these cycles. I do believe that there's these cycles in society. And when we don't learn the lessons of the past, right? When we don't apply that construct moving forward, then we are destined to repeat some of those failures. And I think we're going to see that playing out right now, unfortunately. It is a hard time. But I'll give you a little something, right? Here's a little something, I don't know how many of you are in here right now. Where did Bob go? Man, we gotta find Bob. I want you to think of the fact that we had 25 students in our class, and now we're down to like 15, but you're here. right? And I know that some of you are out of work. And I know that, you know, a lot of you have anxiety. I have anxiety too. You know, when I realized I was going to have to get a car yesterday, I had to like not answer my phone for a while, right? And just like, you know, check in with myself. I know we all are having, you know, different issues. And we're all stuck inside going a little stir crazy. My dog is like the only thing I can touch. Right? You know, I'm hugging him. He's kind of like, oh my God, get off me, right? What are you gonna do? Is that too much sharing? I know. But you're here and you're doing it and you haven't given up. And a lot of your classmates, maybe not in this class, but you know, across campus, I'm hearing from different faculty members that they're having a hard time finding their students, getting them to come back. You're still here. And you have the technology and the ability to be here face to face and engage, right? And in that, we can find solace together, right? We can be there together as a group here. And we're about to talk about and learn about one of the hardest parts in our history as we're navigating into that ourselves. And that can be very triggering, but we have each other. And for that, you know, we're much better off than a lot of people, right?
That was a great speech.
Thanks, you like that? That's my, yeah. I'm gonna try to like make keep you with happy thoughts at the end of classes now, just because, you know, I usually I like throw those bombs out and you're all like, oh, and I'm like, get out of here, go chew on that. But you know, let's do one thing. We've got a few minutes here and you're all here. So I want to go through and do gratitude. Have we done gratitude before in our class? No? Great. Well, we're going to do it now, right? I just want everyone who's here, and don't try to dip out because I can see you all, right? But I want everyone that's here to just say one thing to us that they're grateful for, right? So I'm grateful to be here with you because seeing all of you really, you know, raises my spirits. So I'm very grateful for that.
I'm grateful that it seems like at least a good portion of America is following the quarantine rules.
Not
At
Florida.
least in
Yeah.
this town, at least.
I know, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
here. Mm-hmm.
I'm grateful that I'm employed. It's pretty cool.
I'm grateful to still have a job and be able to support my children because I don't know what I'd do if I didn't have a job at this point.
Grateful for food. It's delicious and providing me comfort during these strange times.
My aunt says, food is like a little hug.
No, I'm grateful that I got Zoom to work. I didn't think I was going to do it, you know, in the beginning, but it's pretty simple.
Woohoo, you did it.
I'm grateful that my family is healthy.
That's important.
I'm grateful that I still have a job, one that's been deemed essential, and that I haven't gotten sick from it yet. Knock on wood.
I'm grateful that I have a job in healthcare, even though it freaks me out.
Sure.
I'm grateful that all my family is well because we, like a lot of us, have underlying conditions. So I'm just grateful that we're not sick or anything.
I'm grateful that I get to spend time with my family and get to, be with each other and disconnect from the busy world that we live in.
Ian, what you grateful for?
Me?
Yeah.
I said food already.
Oh, you said food already?
Yeah.
That was you? Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm grateful for food. I like food. I like cheeseburgers. Rowan, what about you? What are you grateful for? Plenty, I'm sure. Plenty, I'm sure. All right, y'all. Well, this has been great. There's 13 of us here. I think that's a great show for week 1 back. Do you have any questions for me before we call it a day?
I have one about the discussions that we have to do.
Okay.
So just to clarify, the first one has to be 300 words long.
Yes.
And then we have to write 2 responses that could be any amounts of words.
Yeah, it could be any
like 2
amount of
different-
words. Mhm.
Okay.
As long
Very
as it's
cool.
substantive and it promotes further discussion. So like, again, like if I'm like, hey, Dan, great comments. You did a great job there. That's going to get me, 1 or 2, maybe 2 or 3 points out of 10. But if I say that, and then I say, I want to elaborate more on what you said, and then I contribute, that'll be 10 points.
Okay. Cool.
Anyone else?
So we
Yeah.
have
Mhm.
we have the wiki assignment, we have the discussion assignment, and then we have like the 6 questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that moving forward, the 6-question assignment will be the last assignment that I give you. And I'll probably take down, I don't know, it's hard because I still want you to do this work and I still want it to be meaningful. And I want to keep it rigorous enough so that, I can defend your grades. And I just feel like I'm concerned that there's going to be that, all of these schools and all these classes are going to pass fail. And I was so concerned that there's going to be a lot of questions that come up about the rigor in the classroom. And so I want to make sure that I've kept it to a standard where other schools will accept the grade and accept the credit. So I want to do that, but I also don't want to overwhelm you. So at this point, my thought is I'm not going to have any more additional assignments besides the discussion and then your group project and then just scaffolding the paper, right? So it's just research for the paper, your group assignments, and then keeping up with the weekly work. And I think that would be more than enough anyway. So I think this will probably be your last.
Really? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Is our paper really the only thing we have for like our final activity?
You've got the virtual exhibits, and you'll be presenting those.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. But we're still, in this area, we're still 2 weeks out from the peak of all of this. So yeah, at this point, I think we're just going to keep with that. Does that sound fair?
Sounds good to me.
Our group projects, are we going to be presenting them via Zoom? I know that
Yes.
originally we were going to, do the thing at Atrium. Oh, so we're doing them kind of in class, presenting through Zoom.
Right. And my hope is that we can do a live feed on GCC's website so that anybody who wants to come in and see can. But if not, I definitely wanted to record it, to stream it so that other people can see the work you were doing in the class.
Gotcha.
Yeah, show everybody else up. We're still badasses over here. Whoop, whoop. No pandemic and isolation can stop us. All right then, my babies. Thank you so much for coming today. And always, remember that I care about you, right? I want you to be kind to each other. I want you to make good choices. And now I got to add, and I want you to wash your hands. Wash your hands, wash your hands. All right? Whoop, whoop. Washing your hands is cool, cool. It's a long time in this house alone. All right, y'all. So I'll see you on the discussion board. I'll see you in our seminar next week. Visit me during my office hours. Come and say hi. Me and this dog over here, you know, he's not great conversationalist. So yeah. All right. You take care of yourselves. Be well.
Goodbye. You too.
Bye. Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Katrina.
Bye. I don't know how to get out of this thing.
I'm going to stop it now.
Oh, okay.